as archivists for these organizations, there are two things. One is that you are seeking to have collections offered to you. And on the other side, those of us who would like to have our photographs in an organization, it's also like going to a gallery, or a car dealership. Are you a Bentley? Are you a Cadillac? Or are you Chevrolet? And how do you know that which organization is going to service or bring your pictures to the public? Because there's also a revenue stream. If you're with an organization that is very reliable, I have one picture that I took of Louise Nevelson through the Pace Gallery, and that has been used for 37 years, and I get an income from it. It's not going to make money for me, but I know that they're very reliable and that is a gallery that I can depend on. So here's the thing, for those of us who want to get into a reliable organization, how do we go about picking?
I might say I often encourage. Just as I will research and do due diligence about collections being presented to me. Just I think the theme of yesterday and theme of what we've all been talking about is that we also want the potential donor to do research on us, and I encourage folks that come to me to approach a variety of our peer institutions so that you have that opportunity to know what different institutions offer. I can only speak to what my institution can offer, and so though it's a lot of research, that it behooves you, if you're trying to place your archive at a collection, to know the different available options and to know what each collection or institution might offer, because they will all be different. I know that's not a direct answer, but I think each of us can always speak to what our own home institutions do.
That would be exactly what I would say, is you have to do your research.
I felt like that yesterday as well. I mean, it takes work.
Shop around. No resource. I asked this yesterday. There are other people here today. There's no Zadok that gives you an overview of what these are. So why, let me ask.
We'll address that in the next step. I'll address the Zadok survey in the next step.
All right, we're going to move on.
Yeah, I have a question for Leslie and the other panelists, who's also brought up a little bit yesterday. So it's really an open one. And this is from the perspective of the archive. You talked about a distinction between exhibition prints, vintage prints, fine prints, and study prints. So my question is this something that is written down and defined as to what each of these categories are? And is there agreement among each of the archival institutions as what constitutes each of these categories? And also, and also from the point of view of those of us who have collections, how we define them. And I assume that would probably be the answer. So is there anything further you can expound on that in terms of, how we think about it?
Basically, the best thing is if the artist is still alive and makes those distinctions. Because if not, then you're left with the curator and the artist making those distinctions, and sometimes it depends on who's in the institution at that time, because it varies. Just because Perry Winogrand didn't sign a print doesn't mean it's not a fine print. Or, and other people have opinions on, what the margins are, how they're mounted, or, there's all kinds of things. So it's best if you, as the artist, say what these are.
If we're dealing with collections of artists who are deceased, as I'm dealing with, then I'm talking about this in terms of an approach to an institution, like how we would then define for you what is in there. I mean, obviously a posthumous print and life print can be clarified, but, I mean, is that key for you to have that kind of distinction or not necessarily?
I would say that we do that, but, I'm not incredibly comfortable talking about that. I leave what an exhibition printed. I mean, you have to do research. Was it exhibited? Would it have been exhibited? Figuring out whether something's vintage or not. Sometimes that involves people like Paul Messier telling the papers whether brighteners have been added. There's a lot of different things. That's why it's tricky. But yes, those have to be laid down when an archive comes in, because later on, when I'm not here or the curator that brought it in isn't here, then those things get squishy, and that's what you don't want.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So one difference I understood between the three of you, and this might be wrong, but Lisa, if you're donating your collection, you're not going to facilitate, you'll facilitate, but you won't originate exhibitions and books, where the other two institutions have wings that do that. So with William Gedney, he wasn't a great self-promoter, you said, but because he was so exceptionally well organized, he could be discovered, and 25 years later he's having a retrospective. But if you don't have that level of organization and you're not a self-promoter, your institution might not have been a good choice, because it would not have risen to the surface. Do you see what I mean?
It really depends. There's a vernacular image collection that was less described, but we knew something about the maker that is having a resurgence. But I think when those opportunities come for the books and exhibitions and things like that, it is external, or it's a faculty member. Again, it's another faculty member that's doing this work on a vernacular collection. So it's that faculty member's connections and ability to get a book contract and things like that. So we do facilitate the opportunity for scholars to come in and do that work. And I'm trying to make sure the Duke community and being at places like this know about the collections we have to get people to come to do that. But you're right that for my organization, it does help to have the most information possible, because we're a research institution and because we have researchers coming to us looking for that level of information.
But I would just add that, although ICT originates, publications and exhibitions, doesn't mean that they can do that with the hundreds of thousands of objects that are in our collection. And what a research institution like yours can provide, that mine hasn't traditionally been able to provide, is really great access for the whole scholarly field. And that's actually, I would say, better. I would argue that 100% of your collection catalog, or findable through a finding aid, is the best way of the work being interpreted widely, as opposed to just a cluster of curators of one institution. So, and for me, this is my perspective as a librarian. I mean, that I want the broadest access possible, as opposed to it just being the special pet collection of a finite group.
I have two quick questions for you. You touched on one of my favorite topics, but I've never been able to actually put a figure on it, which is monetizing how much it costs to bring an object into your collection, a photograph versus a piece of paper. The second question I have for you is, how do you deal with digital information? Email, correspondence, Word documents, Photoshop information, maybe social media.
Two of the toughest questions. Digital preservation is something that we're just starting in, because our collection is just starting to accession digital objects. We've just accessioned 2 in the last year. And as for our archives, our institutional archives have not yet been processed, and I have a grant out for them that I'm hoping to hear positive results from in a month, to be able to start on that process, and that will be one of the things that we're going to have to tackle with the institutional archives. But we've got a really great IT department who's been really good at having, lots of copies and things like that. So we're dealing with preserving this stuff until we can actually create the kind of the level of access that we want to be able to do. And I feel confident that our archivists are going to be able to tackle that when that's the top of their list for that time. It hasn't come up with the Cornell Kappa papers yet, and that's really the first project that they worked on. And it's, they're stopping at 1974, so it's not going to come up. But our institutional archives will be a big issue, and it's a big issue in our school already as well. And we've got a digital asset management system here in the school where I actually use it as a de facto archive space. Trying to put a figure on what it costs is one of the toughest questions you could ask anybody who's an information professional. Over the years, I know that if I want to make people hysterical, I'm going to ask a cataloger, like, how long does it take you to catalog a book? No one's screaming from the room. It's a tough question. I recently was writing a grant, this archives grant, and when I got to